Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am your host, Vortex, from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And if you are new to the channel, what we do here is release weekly videos teaching people how to produce music on their iOS device. And in today's video, we're going to be showing you some of the basics on how to create your very first lo-fi song right after this. And remember folks, if you do enjoy this content, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Now if you're not yet familiar with the lo-fi genre, it's basically a combination of classic hip-hop drums with some smooth jazz chords, often being played from a Wurlitzer or a Rhodes electric piano. And really at this point, there is just a ton of YouTube playlists with this style of music generating tens of millions of views. It really does all seem to be a part of this latest nostalgic craze where everybody just wants to go back to the 80s and 90s when life was just a little bit more simple. Now the word lo-fi is an abbreviated term for what is known as low fidelity, and this is often a term that is used to describe audio quality that's less than that of CD commercial standard. In lo-fi, pretty much everything is run through some kind of filter or tape machine to give it a bunch of these imperfections, things like vinyl crackle, a bunch of static, or some kind of tape warble. This creates a really laid-back vibe that is often used by listeners when programming or studying or doing something that requires a bunch of focus. And if you do want to start making this style of music, then you know we have your back because we just released a completely free brand new Essential Sample Pack for lo-fi. That was released just this Wednesday on June 30th and is available on our website right now at MobileMusicPro.com/free. Alright, and now with that intro aside, let's hop right into Cubasis and start breaking down this lo-fi track. Alright, now what we're going to do is first play you this track, and then we're going to break it all down by each individual section, such as drums, chords, melody, and so forth. So let's get started on that now. But before we do get started, you'll notice real quick that on this FX track we do have this soloed right now. And that is because we have a tape machine right now on our drums that is causing a bunch of static in the background. So in order to keep this recording still sounding good, I definitely soloed that track. But when I do hit play, you'll hear that tape machine kick in the background and you'll hear that familiar tape hiss. Alright, so let's unsolo this track, close the mixer, and hit play. Alright, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Let's go ahead and solo this track once more so we don't have that hiss in the background here. So we'll tap on the channel tab on the left hand side and then tap the solo button and all is clear. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to take care of after that sound demo is a project overview. So the first thing that you might notice over here to the far left-hand side is a big gaping gap, and basically that's where I originally created the 8-bar demo, the 8-bar loop that I then turned into this entire song. And if we zoom in a little bit here, we'll be able to actually see my arrangement track. And you can see that I created MIDI tracks here with the labels of intro, verse 1, pre-chorus 1, chorus 1, and so forth. It goes all the way to the bridge, then verse 2, then the pre-chorus 2, then the final chorus repeated once more, and then finally an outro. Now again, Cubasis doesn't actually come with an arrangement track, so these are just actually MIDI regions right here with the proper labels on here. Or not the proper labels, but I mean the labels of the individual parts of the song here. We can take a look at the overall project BPM. You can see that it is coming in at 85 BPM, and that is pretty standard for lo-fi tracks. They are going to be between around 80 and 90 BPM most of the time, because they really are trying to invoke that classic hip-hop genre, and that classic hip-hop is always around between 80 and 95 BPM. Now, if you look here, you'll see that there is a total of 29 tracks, but a bunch of these are frozen. So there's about 7 or 8 extra tracks here that wouldn't be there if I didn't have to freeze the tracks. And then finally, as far as how long the song actually is, it starts at around 23 seconds here and goes all the way to 4 minutes and 8 seconds. So somewhere around 3 minutes and some change there, not too bad. All right, and now I think we can get started breaking down this track. And the first section of the track that we'll be breaking down is going to be the drums. Now, as you can see, we don't have a whole lot of drum tracks here. It's just made up of our cymbal, hats, snare, kick, and then finally our drum bus. Now, what I've done here is I've gone ahead and disabled the Real Bus plugin so we don't have that static in the background. Now, all of these drum sounds, including the cymbal, hats, snare, and kick, are going to be coming from our brand new sample pack. And in that pack, we're actually including a bunch of different drum MIDI in addition to just the sounds. But for this track, I just wanted to use the sounds to create my own pattern. And if we zoom in here, you can see that it's really not that complex of a pattern, a pretty standard kick and snare shuffle. Now, all of these drum sounds, I believe, is using the first kit in our pack. And we can just double check that real quick. The hats, snare, and kick, are all using the first drum kit here inside of our new sample pack. And also, if you are curious about lo-fi drum patterns, we actually have a completely free Essentials MIDI pack that has a bunch of different patterns in there from pretty much every single genre. In fact, we have 8 different genres in there with 5 patterns each for a total of 40 different patterns. And that MIDI pack, like this sample pack, is available 100% free on our website at MobileMusicPro.com/free. You can see that for each one of these tracks, we have our standard effects, including the channel strip and studio EQ. And we're using pretty standard presets in those as well. For example, if we take a look at our cymbal, we go to the studio EQ, we can see that we're using the factory preset of Perk Cymbal 1. And then if we go into the channel strip, I'm not even sure we're using a preset in here. Nope, just a default there. Just adjusting the gain here at the very bottom. Now we do have a couple of extra plugins on some of these tracks, like the snare and the kick. So for the snare, instead of a standard EQ, we actually ended up using a shelf EQ, which is pretty much the same as a standard EQ, except you only pretty much have the options of adjusting low and high. Now if we move on to the kick here, we can see that I have a couple of additional plugins like the FAC Transient and the New York Compressor. So if we open up the Transient, you can see we're using the Punch on Drums preset, and this is really handy for getting our kick to punch through the mix. I actually end up using this plugin on pretty much every single kick track, no matter the genre. And then after that, we have our New York Compressor. Let's make this a little bit bigger here first. And all I'm doing with this plugin is just giving it a little bit of extra gain, around 3 dB or so. But I am using the soft clipping feature in this plugin by enabling the soft knee option over here. You'll find a number of different options over here on the right hand side. This really is a great overall plugin for helping to get your kicks and your drums punched through the mix. And if we zoom out a bit here, you can see that we pretty much use the exact same pattern throughout the entire track. And pretty much everything stays the same here, except for this middle section here. So on the first and last section, we actually apply an additional kick, where in the middle section, we remove a kick, just to keep the pattern a little bit more dynamic and to keep the listener guessing. Now, if we take a look at our hat pattern here, you can see that a bunch of our notes here are off the grid a little bit. For example, this note right here, we zoom in a little bit, go right here, this hat is off as well. And that is because we applied something called swing. And you'll find that here at the very top in your quantize options. With this menu, you can adjust the swing with a slider right here, and this will determine how far your notes are off the grid. For this hat pattern, we ended up applying around 25-26% swing, and what that's going to do is make your drum pattern feel a little bit more human, and if you place the notes just right, it will create a very specific lo-fi vibe. And also for the hats, in addition to just our standard channel strip and studio EQ, we also added a tape delay. This is a plugin that is built into Cubasis 3. And there's actually a ton of great plugins built into this DAW that I end up using all the time. And then finally for the drum bus, we have 2 separate plugins, the first of which is our compressor. And this is just used to rein in a bunch of those transients inside of our drum tracks, and just overall leveling out the entire drum mix there to make sure that everything is nice and tight. And then finally we have our Real Bus plugin over here. Let's take a look at this. Now, as we said at the top of the video, pretty much every one of these sounds in the lo-fi genre gets run through some kind of tape machine or some kind of filter. So we can inject some of these imperfections that were so common in recording equipment in the 80s and 90s. So that pretty much is it for the drums. You do want to keep them pretty simple in this genre. Remember that the vibe of the overall genre is very, very laid back. Alright, now let's move on to the next section. Alright, next up, let's take a look at the vocals. Now there's not a whole lot of vocals going on in this particular track. In fact, it's just a repeating vocal sample. But it still adds a ton of vibe and character to the overall song. Now where we're actually going to be using this vocal hook in the overall track is going to be in the pre-chorus and the chorus. So first what I do is tease the sample a little bit in the beginning of the pre-chorus, and then I bring it in for the entire chorus. Now as far as processing is going, there is a few things going on here. The first is just a channel strip to turn down the volume a little bit here, not doing anything extra besides that. And then we have an amp sim on here, another plugin built into Cubasis 3. That's going to add some of that harshness, some of that grit that I want on the vocals. And then after that we have a stereo width, which is going to spread the vocals to the edge of the speakers there, to the edge of the stereo spectrum. And then finally a filter after that to tame down the harshness that was created from that amp sim. Now let's quickly hear a before and after. So this is what it sounds like before without any of the plugins on. And then with all of our plugins on, let's hear that. And that's really about it for the vocals. Like we said, there's just not a whole lot of vocal tracks in this particular song. And moving right along, we are now about to talk about the effects. Now this track actually has a good amount of effects in it, as most lo-fi tracks do. And pretty much any modern track these days has some of these basic things like, for example, risers, downlifters, impacts, and more. So let's take a look at what we have. We have these three sounds that play quickly in succession of each other, but I want to break them down what they are first. So let's listen to this one first. Now that is an effect that is coming from our brand new Essentials Lo-Fi sample pack. And that sound came from a preset inside the brand new KV Audio Synthmaster 2. Now that sound pretty much goes by a number of different names, such as splash or downlifter and so on. But we actually got this sound out of a free FX pack from Echo Soundworks. And now let's hear all three of these sounds together in succession as they're played in the track. So you can see I start a sound there, and then just a little bit after that, I bring in another sound. Layering sounds over one another like this is a pretty standard technique to keep the listener interested. Now besides those FX sounds that we just discussed, we also have a percussion hit in here as well. And personally within my projects, I like to categorize these types of percussion hits as effects, and I generally keep them separate from the rest of the drum tracks. So let's hear what this sounds like now. Alright, very cool. And again, pretty much no effects here, just a channel strip. I think that's all I have on pretty much any one of these effects because the sounds themselves were already pretty good, just needed some levels adjusting. And then finally we just have this one impact here at the very end of the track, mostly just to signify that the song is over. Let's hear what that sounds like. And then just one more effects to go over here. I almost forgot about this one actually. This is our riser effect. And I believe this also came from Echo Soundworks as well. Let's hear what this sounds like. These downlifter and riser effects really help the listener understand where they are in the actual song. And these effects also end up acting like audible cues, letting the listener know that something new is coming. Again, it is all about keeping the listener interested and engaged. So adding a bunch of different effects like these in very specific places in your track really helps it sound more professional. And next up in the video, we're going to be discussing the bass. Now as far as the MIDI pattern goes here, it's pretty standard. I'm just literally taking the bass notes from our chord progression. And if we open that up, we can take a look and see. And if we zoom in here, we can see the notes up close. And the key for this track was G minor, so as you can see, we are starting out with the G first. But overall, a very, very simple synth bass pattern here. And as far as the sound, that will be coming from the stock plugin built inside of Cubasis 3 called the Microloog. And within this synthesizer, we are using the double sine bass preset. And I didn't actually end up changing any additional settings for this, it just sounded good by itself. But there are, however, a couple of things going on here inside of the plugins. So if we take a look at our Insert Plugin drop down here in the inspector, we can see we have a Channel Strip, Studio EQ, and FAC Bandit. So if we pull up the Channel Strip, we're not actually doing anything too crazy here, in fact, just giving it a little bit of tape drive. But what we are doing is utilizing the brand new sidechain feature inside of Cubasis 3. So if we take a look at this sidechain button right here, we can click on the drop down, and we can see that we are currently receiving input signal from the kick track. Now, if you're not familiar with what sidechaining is, it is essentially just using a signal from another track to be able to tell your current track when to duck its signal. And you've definitely heard this effect before in modern music. It's used all over trap and definitely all over electronic music. The sidechain technique is what creates that pumping effect inside of all those electronic genres. But here we are using it to duck the kick a little bit so that our kick can come through our overall mix a little bit better. And then after our channel strip, we just have a pretty standard Studio EQ in here. Nothing too crazy, just using a stock preset here of Synth Bass 2. And then finally we have our FAC Bandit. Now this is a bit of the secret sauce here, because a really big thing that defines lo-fi is its huge low end. And a big part of that low end is both going to be made up from the bass and the chords. And luckily we already have some pretty amazing lo-fi presets inside of FAC Bandit. And as you can see here, we are using the preset of Brady Plus 808 Lo-Fi. And just a quick note on how we actually arranged this bass within our track, you can see that I don't start the beginning of the song or the beginning of each verse with the bass. For lo-fi tracks, I usually like to bring in the bass a little bit later and start out with just the drums and the pads. And that is pretty much it for the bass. The bass inside of lo-fi tracks can range anything from simple synth basses like this to more complex electric bass patterns. It all really depends on the vibe that you're going for. If you're going for something more simple and laid back like we are here, then probably a synth bass is good to use. But if you are going for something more upbeat and more jazzy, then you might want to use an electric bass. Alright, and next up, let's take a look at these chords. Now these chords really aren't too complex here. In fact, I started out with just triads. As I mentioned before, the key of this track was G minor. So what I ended up doing is using the Tonality app and ended up tapping in these chords via their chord pads. And then once I had my triads, I then proceeded to add a bass note for each one of these chords. And then after that, I took the middle note in each one of these chords and raised that up an octave. And then finally, I ended up adding a fourth note for each one of these chords after that. And then after that, I copied and pasted this pattern over for another 4-bar pattern to give me a total of 8 bars. And I ended up only changing the last note of the very last chord, just to switch it up a little bit to make sure that the overall 8-bar pattern is unique. It doesn't sound super repetitive over and over again. And then for the effects, I added quite a few in here. But before we get to those, let's take a look at the instrument that was used to create these chords. So if we open up Pure Synth here you can see we're using the Cream EP preset. And it does absolutely sound creamy and wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. If you don't know by now, Gospel Musicians pretty much makes the best electronic pianos on the iPad. If you don't know, now you know. When it comes to lo-fi chords, you generally want to stick with the more jazzy type of chords, something like the 7th, 9th, and 11th chords. Here you can see we didn't do that because I wanted to keep it a little bit more simple. But overall, you will find those more jazzy type of chords in a ton of lo-fi tracks. Alright, and for our next section, let's take a look at these pads. Now in the song overall, I believe I only have 2 different pad tracks in here, so let's take a look at these now. And I believe they are using the exact same MIDI as well, both of these pads. If we open this up, we can see that it's just using pretty much the top notes of our chord progression, so nothing too complex there. Now the original sound here is coming from our sample pack. This is coming from the EP4 Synth Shot 15 preset. Each one of our sample packs always comes with a bunch of one-shots, and this one is no different. I believe that this particular pack comes with 18 different instrument one-shots, in addition to some FX one-shots as well. Now we have quite a bit of processing on here, so let's hear what this sounds like before the effects and then after. So we'll disable all these effects first. And actually before I hit play, there's actually a number of send effects on here as well. So let's disable those first, and then hit play. Now you might have heard that sounds more like an arpeggio than a pad, and that is because we also have a MIDI effect on here called Rosetta Arpeggio. And if we didn't have that effect on here, it would just play the notes by themselves. But now when we enable the Rosetta arpeggio, and then enable all of these different send effects, including the FAC chorus, the Adverb 2 from Audio Damage, and then the Roomworks SE, we're going to get a whole different sound. But as you can hear, it doesn't sound like a pad just yet. So for our insert effects, we have the standard channel strip and studio EQ, but we also have this amazing tape model plugin by the Chow developer. So if we open this up, we can see that we are using the LoFi preset. And the only thing I adjusted here was the output gain. I ended up actually turning that down a little bit. But other than that, it's pretty much the LoFi preset. And then after that, we have the Shimmerverb plugin from the fabulous developers over there at Eventide. And this is just a great plugin for adding a ton of different texture to your sounds. There's just a bazillion presets in here too, so I highly recommend everybody check this out. But now with all of those plugins enabled, let's hear what it sounds like. So just a huge sound there, a huge epic evolving pad. Thanks to the genius of these amazing plugins, you can go from a pretty simple, relatively simple sound to creating huge, fantastical, beautiful soundscapes. Alright, and here is our second pad track here inside of this song. Now, unlike the previous pad where we did a bunch of different processing, for this particular track we barely did any processing at all. And that's because the sound already sounded exactly like we wanted. So if we actually open up the plugin that created that, you can see that that is the amazing Synthmaster 2 by KV Audio. And for the preset, we are using the PD Square Wave Pad. And again, not too much processing on here, pretty much just a channel strip. And if we take a look at that channel strip, you can see we're really not doing a whole lot of stuff here, just again adjusting the gain and using some side compression. And again, we are using the kick track as our sidechain input. So let's hear what this sounds like now. Alright, very, very pretty there, and pretty much exactly as the preset described. And the next part of our melody is coming from another piano here with those same settings that we had pretty much for our piano chords, using the same pure synth with the same Cream EP preset, and a lot of the same plugins here, including the Timeless 3 and all those same send effects, which was the FAC chorus and the Adverb 2. So let's hear what these sound like by themselves. Alright, very cool, giving a bunch of atmosphere, some texture, and a little bit of vibe to the overall sound. When it comes to lo-fi, you definitely want to take advantage of some kind of delay plugin, because when you are creating these more slowed down tracks, with not a whole lot of complex drums, you really can create a ton of atmosphere and a ton of vibe with the right delay. And the last part of the melody is our piano arpeggio, and that's actually going to be using just the standard microsonic piano coming from Cubasis 3. So nothing really too fancy there, but I definitely did add some additional plugins. So if you look here on the far left hand side, we can see we have our standard channel strip and studio EQ, but I also have an RX 950 on here to give this a little bit more flavor and to filter down this piano a little bit. Again, to give it a little bit more of a lo-fi feel. And then after this, we also have a few send plugins as well, that FAC chorus and Adverb 2 again. So let's hear what this sounds like with all the plugins together. And then without all of the plugins, sounds pretty much like a standard piano. Let's hear what that sounds like now. And that is pretty much it for the melody, folks. Just really a couple of pianos and a couple of arpeggios. And now finally, last but not least, the ambient sounds. Now every great lo-fi track is definitely going to have some ambient sounds in the background. Whether that's nature sounds like birds playing like we have here, or maybe some kind of traffic or even an ocean sound. All of these different ambient sounds can be used to create very specific vibes for your track. So there really are two main ambient sounds inside of every lo-fi track. And one of those is going to be some kind of vinyl crackle or tape hiss. And then the second sound, like we said, usually is some kind of nature sound or even some ambient sounds found inside cities. Both of our ambient sounds here, the vinyl crackle and the outdoor sound, is going to be coming from a sample pack from Echo Soundworks. And you can hear that when they are added to the song, it really does provide a whole different vibe. So let's hear what these sound like individually by themselves real quick. Let's first play the vinyl crackle, and then we'll play the outdoors sound. Alright, very cool, as you can hear, introducing a number of these audio imperfections. And now let's hear that ambient outdoors track. Alright, so you can definitely hear some birds chirping in the background there, you can hear some bugs in the grass. It really helps paint a picture and helps create this laid-back vibe to your track. Alright, and just really quick, we wanted to walk you through our brand new completely free Essential Sample Pack, LoFi. And this particular sample pack is structured very similar to the rest of our packs. You'll find all the main folders that you need right here in the root directory, as well as a README file with instructions on how to install all these sounds into the individual apps. But if you don't want to read all this, we definitely have videos with instructions letting you know how to install these sounds into your apps. Now this new sample pack is exciting because it is the first of our version 1.2 sample packs. And version 1.2 is going to come with two main additional features. And one of those features is drum MIDI. So if we take a look at our MIDI folder here, we can see that in addition to having our bass and melody MIDI, we now have our drum MIDI. And we have two different versions, each with a different layout. We have your standard general MIDI layout that is used in a variety of different plugins, and then we have our layout, which is used for all of our sample packs. So you can easily drag and drop any one of these into your DAW. And the second really cool feature that is coming with this version 1.2 sample pack is RX2 files. Now, without going into too much detail, RX2 files for drums and melodies are essentially pre-chopped up files. And we can quickly demonstrate that by opening up Chord Gadget, as currently Chord Gadget is the only app that supports these RX2 files on the iPad. And what you're going to do is load up a new project and then add the Stockholm gadget. And then once you've copied the files onto your iPad, you can simply browse for them by tapping the name here. Once you have selected one of these Rex files from either the bass, drum, or melody folders, you can then immediately begin playing it on your keyboard or pad controller. And you can see each one of the individual slices here in this graphical layout. You can trigger any one of these slices by tapping on them, or you could go to the pads by tapping on the Perf tab up here, and then tap on pads. So this then becomes a really cool and fun new way to customize our sounds to your liking. Now quickly getting back to the directory here, all of our sample packs come with these main folders. If you are going to be installing our sounds inside of your iOS device, then definitely check out the iOS folder. That will have presets for all of the different apps that we support. But if you do want to just check out the raw WAV files that you can use inside of any DAW, then you can just check out the WAV folder here. And that will have all of our individual sounds categorized into these folders. Now this particular pack is going to come with over 300 sounds, which is comprised of over 30 melodies and 5 drum kits. So there really is pretty much everything that you need here to create tracks in the lo-fi genre. Alright, and now it's time again for our final thoughts. And if you are still rocking with us, then we just can't thank you enough for being here, and we especially can't thank those people enough that are here every single Wednesday and Friday watching our live streams and live premieres, helping us to build out this community. Now we really do hope that this video has given you some inspiration to start making some brand new music in this lo-fi genre. Or really any genre, of course, we just want you to make more music. Because I gotta tell you folks, it really has been a ton of fun experimenting with all of these tape machines and all of these filter plugins. And in fact, so much so that we're going to be doing a top 5 tape machines video just next week. What I really found to be one of the trickiest bits so far is trying to get a bunch of nice low end out of my pianos without the sound getting too filtered down from using a tape plugin on top of it. But of course, that is part of the fun with experimenting with all of these different genres, learning about all the nuances and fundamentals that go into making these tracks really sound good. And if you are looking for some quality sounds in this genre, then definitely make sure to check out our brand new free Essential Sample Pack 4, Lo-Fi. That was released just this week on June 30th and is available right now on our website at MobileMusicPro.com/free. And we have a brand new contest starting just next week using this free sample pack that's going to go from July 7th all the way through July 28th. And just like with our previous contest, we have over $200 worth of combined prizes waiting for the top 4 lucky winners, with the grand prize being a brand new Novation Mini Key 25 MIDI keyboard. For further rules, prizes, and details on how to enter, make sure to head over to our website at MobileMusicPro.com/contest. And of course, we always have a ton more content coming down the pipe for you folks, so if you do want to keep up with everything that we're doing over here, from contests to sample packs, videos, and more, definitely make sure to head over to our website and sign up for our completely free mailing list at MobileMusicPro.com. And so, until next time everybody, keep talking music, and we'll see you later. Hey Hey everybody, Vortex here, and if you're not aware yet, we now have over 100 fully edited mobile music tutorial videos. And we make music every single Wednesday live on our channel right inside of Cubasis on our iPad. Plus, we also have a bunch of free sample packs, guides, and more at our website at MobileMusicPro.com/free. And so if you are into that sort of thing, producing music on your iPhone or iPad, then definitely make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of the videos on the channel that we know you'll love.